Hi guys, thank you so
Hippopotamus.
much for coming back to the channel. We have another tea time, and this time I'm with my illustrious and wonderful friend, Requiem. Requiem?
Hi, I'm not illustrious at all. I'm just a Discord mom and gamer who really just doesn't give a fuck 99% of the time.
It's true. I will be putting links to Requiem's Twitch channel down in the description below if you don't mind going to see her, because she is very funny, and she has wonderful gameplay.
I have cats that are funny. I'm not the funny one.
I set in stance. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about something that me and Requiem were talking about for several days, and eventually I asked, hey, do you want to do a tea time on this? We are going to be talking to you about the fact that a lot of the fairy tales that you know in the modern time are actually really watered down, like to the point where it's more water than the actual substance of the original stories.
Especially since the original story isn't even technically called Little Red Riding Hood.
That is also very true. So today we're going to be tackling. I could talk. We're going to be tackling.
We're going to be tickling and tackling because we're that creepy.
Yeah, we're going to be touching on. That's still a horrible way to phrase that sentence. Today we're going to be
Especially
talking about.
when we're talking about children. So.
Yeah. Today we're going to be talking about the Little Red Riding Hood story, the original Peter Pan story, and the original Rapunzel story. Two of these are technically Brothers Grimm properties, and the other one is a book written by a Scottish man.
Who, as we are all very well aware, are very, 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 very seldomly ever lighthearted when telling a story.
It's true.
If anything, they'll exaggerate it to make it more gruesome.
Mm-hmm.
To prove the manliness!
Yeah. So, we'll start with Little Red Riding Hood first. Most people know the Little Red Riding Hood story as little girl gets told by a mother, deliver cookies and cakes to grandma through the 100-acre woods and blah blah blah. And she eventually finds a wolf who tries to trick her by pretending to be said grandma. He eats grandma, her, and a woodsman saves them. That's usually the TLDR of that story. That TLDR is false.
Extremely, especially since in the French original version of this, she was eaten, and in the German original version, she was actually rescued.
Right. So today we're going to be talking about the original German version from the Brothers Grimm, circa I think like late early 1500s. So right around.
And not the French's version of what could be considered child porn or, child-sized cannibalism.
That's true. So the original story from the Brothers Grimm perspective was Little Red Riding Hood, which is not even really what that was originally called, but for the sake of keeping a clear line, that's what we're going to go with. Little Red Riding Hood was a daughter born to a woman and a man in a very affluent town. Now, she was given a red cloak by her mother and grandmother as a joint effort together, and her mother told her, do not go off the trail when going to Grandma's house. You come to find out in the book, Grandma lives out in the middle of nowhere on purpose because Grandma is a witch. That's why she's out in the middle of the woods. Nobody ever talks about that, even in the original story. Why is this old lady out in the middle of nowhere?
There's only one reason for her to be out in the middle of nowhere, and that's because she is a witch.
Right.
Absolutely no other reason for anyone, especially during the time that any of these stories take place, to be on the outskirts of any town is because they were doing something that was considered morally wrong by the mass. And in that time, what was the most morally wrong thing considered by the mass? Being a witch.
Burn the witch. Right.
I'm not a witch!
Right. So Red Riding Hood, when her mother tells her, do not go off the path, she's not talking about, like, the path that everybody goes down, right? The foot trail. Literally a path that her grandmother made for her that is magic-based only. That's why the cloak is there. Is because that's the path that she can take that is a direct one-for-one from Mom's house to Grandma's place with absolutely no danger in between, because Little Red Riding Hood in the story is canonically, at most, 9.
And also consider this path to be almost like if you were to put on your Google Maps, avoid highways so you have a direct shot, rather than going all the way around in a loop.
Right. Now, as most 9-year-olds do, she only listens for so long and then decides, but what's past the path? That's how the story happens.
The stupidity of human children is a common theme through any story.
That is very true. Now, she goes off the path and she does actually meet a woodsman. A poor woodsman. Now, the woodsman, for a whole minute, has a really big, like, where did this kid even come from? Because he didn't hear her, he didn't see her, there was no preamble to her just suddenly being in front of him.
And presumably that would be because of the cloak.
Right. Now, I love to be able to tell this to people. Red in a color prior to after the Renaissance was not considered a color of promiscuity, it was considered a color of wealth. Where purples and really dark navy blues were considered colors of royalty because it was so hard to get the dye for that fabric color, red was
the next
for...
thing after the purples and blues was the red.
Right. Red usually
Which is also why a lot of the cloaks and a lot of the clothing is made in red for the Catholic Church.
It's true. So, for this woodsman that's poor, there is suddenly...
Those sinful bishops and popes.
It's true, they're so sinful.
Such whores.
So much whores. Right, but for the sake of the woodsman, right, being a poor woodsman, suddenly having a very healthy, very well-to-do, according to his eyesight from what he's seeing, little girl just suddenly pop up and appear to him, his immediate thought was, oh, you've got money.
Money is what makes the world go round, especially for a very poor woodsman.
It's true. So Red Riding Hood talks to him for a little bit and everything else, and she eventually gets back on the path she's supposed to be. The woodsman isn't stupid. He kind of low-key stalks her, but he can't figure out how to get in the path, because it's magic.
And for the fact that, it wasn't built by anyone who wanted him to be there.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, I'm pretty sure the grandmother would have woven in special things to keep older men away from her 9-year-old daughter.
Right. Considering this is a time period, too, when marrying child brides was still very okay, I imagine Grandma had
she was of marriageable age, technically.
Yeah.
As long as she was developed physically.
Which is gross, right? That's not what we're going to touch on, but that's gross.
It's the truth, but girls then also matured quicker. Which is why a lot of people took it as an okay approach to redo this story in a sexual manner.
Oh,
because
gross.
if you just take the ideologies of back then, that as long as you were womanly, you could be fucked.
That's super gross.
And they just aged her up in order to make it appropriate for us to sexualize Little Red Riding Hood.
Yeah. It's very much a... Look, we could go into a whole deep dive discussion about why the over-sexualization of little... Yeah.
Yeah, let's make it... Let's make it beyond that, because I will go off.
Yeah. Anyway, in the story, the woodman eventually does figure out where she's at, because he ends up just chasing her for weeks and weeks on end, and he eventually figures out where they are. But Hella, where's the wolf in this? Thank you so much for asking, imaginary audience member. The wolf is Grandma's familiar. Literally, halfway through the path, when Red Riding Hood is going, the wolf is there to pick her up. Because it's not like the wolves of modern day. It is a big wolf.
She was genuinely Little Red Riding Hood's steed to get back to her grandmother's, sent by her grandmother.
Right. So,
what better way to protect your child who's walking around in the woods than a wolf who knows the woods?
Mm-hmm. Here's the really insidious part, right? Is in the original story, the wolf and Little Red Riding Hood have this little thing of, because this is the path they're technically taking to get to Grandmother's house. Over the stream and through the woods to Grandmother's house we go. That is actually something that the wolf and her do giggle about, because even though for Little Red Riding Hood it is a straight path, it's convenient for a 9-year-old to have it be a straight path. Actual getting there is that big of a journey, but we don't talk about that.
Considering that she was also met by a wolf halfway through, presumably I would think it would be halfway through because she was 9 years old. They wouldn't exactly expect a little 9-year-old to walk 3 miles into the wood.
True.
Maybe 1.5 miles at most.
Yeah. Maybe 1.5 miles, but not all the way, 3 miles. And before somebody says...
we know, once the wolf meets her, maybe it's not such a straight shot.
Right. It's not really clear in the original text if it is technically a straight shot after the wolf picks her up, but basically, halfway through, she gets picked up by her fuzzy chauffeur, and then they go the rest of the way together.
Now, here's a query. How did it change that the wolf became this big evil?
Ah, thanks.
I mean, he became what we all know as the big bad wolf.
That's actually because a lot of fear started happening around wolves, is because a lot of people who are stupid and decided, it sounds like a good idea, I'm gonna go live out in the middle of bumfuck nowhere, blah, blah, blah. You're in their house, not the other way around. You decided to come out to the middle of nowhere where they are very adept at living and you're not. I'm sorry, friend.
That same thing that's happening with sharks now.
Yeah. Look, if you want to swim in the ocean for sharks, be my guest. However, you do have to contend with the fact of you are bottom of the food chain. You are food for everything. Yep.
Same thing applies when you go into the woods. You gotta remember that wolves own that shit. But that's actually a fear that is ingrained in people today. People are still so terrified of wolves.
I would like to remind people, I need you to think of the biggest dog breed you've ever seen.
Irish Wolfhound, Jesus Christ, they're like a tiny horse.
Right. That's about, like, a very, like, young wolf. Irish Wolfhounds, like, if you can be around that, a wolf is not that much bigger, realistically, and Kitty, no. That.
Kitty, yes. Do it, cat. Do it.
But do you know what I mean? It's like, wolves are basically just the alpha version of dogs.
Yes, they are, actually. Our common dog now came from domesticizing wolves.
Right. Because if you head scritch it, it'll like the head scritch. PSA,
actually,
do not head scritch wolves.
Where the belly scritches came from.
Rub the belly.
Because if a wolf liked you, they'll turn over on their back and show you their tummy and wiggle.
Right. It's also the reason why, for most modern dogs, if they sneeze while you're roughhousing with them or before you roughhouse, it is a dog's way of indicating it knows that it's a game. You're not actually trying to hurt it. You're playing. If there's no sneeze that preambles that, that's usually your indicator of you're about to have hands thrown and you're gonna lose.
Well, pause.
Well, yeah.
I mean, to continue on the track of the wolves being the big bad thing, that can also turn around and evolve even further into why people sexualize the wolf. For instance, look at the most recent Into the Woods with Johnny Depp as the wolf. The song that the wolf sings is literally "Hello, little girl." Like,
yeah, it's weird.
Dead ass. First couple of lyrics: "Hello, little girl. What's your rush? You're missing all the flowers. We can sit and talk for hours."
Legitimately.
What the fuck does that sound like?
This sounds like the
That sounds like a hobo man walking up the path, seeing a 9-year-old little girl and saying, "Hey, come here."
Right.
They essentially combined the huntsman and the wolf into one, I think.
They did. Oh, actually, that's a great segue back to it. Yes. In the Little Red Riding Hood story, the woodsman eventually figures out who Little Red Riding Hood is and goes to her mother to ask specifically for her hand in marriage, which, you know what, that's gross, moving on. But her mother straight up tells her...
And there's the sexualizing.
Right.
Combine the two.
Right. But her mother straight up tells him, no, she's not old enough for that, even though in that time period, she is definitely old enough for that.
She probably hadn't flowered for the first time yet at that rate.
Right.
Because that's what, back then, that's exactly what would tell the adults that you were ready to be married. Having your first blood.
Yep, it's the reason why that old saying, if you're old enough to bleed, you're old enough to breed. That's where that adage comes from. For the record, that is not what that means. Just because a girl can have her menstrual cycle at 8, 9, 10, doesn't mean her body can actually hold and carry a baby. It means her body is letting her know, hey, we've gone to the next stage of stuff. We're in the beginning beta stage. Don't do anything. Let us have our minutes.
Let me give you your very first introduction into womanhood with Lucifer's Waterfall.
Right. I didn't sign up for the monthly subscription to Satan's Waterfall. That's so fucked up, but it's true. It's true. Just because anybody can get their period at that young does not mean you can actually reasonably carry a baby to term, and even if you do, there is
happened to me.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid to say I got mine extremely early. I got mine in the 4th fucking grade.
I got mine when I was 9. So I don't know what grade I was in. I only know what the hell that was.
About the same age.
Yeah. It's the reason why when women get to this point of, I'm super done and over it, it's because after having it for so many years, you kind of are just like, we don't need a week of this. I would have already guessed that I didn't have a kid in me. I'm making sure there isn't one.
But that's exactly why her parents probably said, no, she's too young, because she hadn't had her first blood yet.
Right.
Not necessarily that she was just too young. To them, physically, her body was still too young.
Right. It's creepy, it's gross, we will not judge our ancestors on their archaic, fucking wrong views. We've evolved and gotten better at stuff. It's fine.
Well, the better half of us have.
Yeah.
So she said no, and therefore the huntsman...
He lost his crap, as all grown man babies do.
Especially the man babies that even you see today's society trying to have a child bride. They get all bitchy and they run away. And their toupees flap in the wind as they run.
Yeah, that's true. But Hella, what about women who like older men? You're right, there is that thing, but remember the words you said, imaginary audience member. Women who like older men. If you decide to rob the grave, that's your prerogative. However, you should not ever...
Don't throw a bitch fit when someone calls you on it.
Right. However, the other side of that is, if you want to rob the grave, you're still going to get judged for it. However, there is no way to make robbing the cradle sound good.
Ever.
But what about a man who's in his...
Robbing the grave has a name. Necrophilia.
Or grave robbing, depending on which one you're going for. Either way, it works.
Either way, it's the same thing. So, this cradle-robbing necrophiliac.
Man, we skipped really far ahead in the story, but let's go ahead. It is implied, even though it's not necessarily outright stated, the huntsman eventually finds Grandma. Here's the thing. Even though Grandma is quote-unquote a witch in this, she's not that kind of a witch where she could turn you into a frog. There's a reason why Red Riding Hood is coming with stuff in the basket.
But I got better.
Right. You're supposed to be dead. I got better? Really?
She turned me into a newt. I got better.
Oh god, that's great. But here's the thing. Grandma was technically a witch, but not like that. She didn't have actual magic. She was
more like a medicine woman.
Right.
If you guys have ever seen Outlander, technically, Claire would have been seen as a witch. And her friend Galus was seen as a witch. Just because they had knowledge of herbs and what to do with it to make you feel better and that they were women, not men.
Right. A man who knows how to make you better with herbs.
Grandma was a wise woman.
Right. It's the reason why Red Riding Hood was going with a basket full of stuff. It wasn't sweets and everything. It was her mother giving her stuff that she got from the town. Red Riding Hood was technically the courier? Courier to go from Mom to Grandma's house. Well, why wasn't the mother doing it? Well, Mom explains that to Red Riding Hood.
Riding Hood, also known as Little Western Union.
Right. Well, you're probably wondering, well, why wasn't Mom considered a witch? They actually do explain that in the story, because Red Riding Hood asked her mother, Grandma knows how to make potions, why don't you? Her mother never learned it. She can't know something she just straight up couldn't, comprehend and get good. The nice way of saying it is, Grandma had magic powers, it skipped a generation. Red Riding Hood does understand how to make potions. That's why she keeps going over there.
She's going there for her lessons so that she can take Grandma's place one day. Which is sort of something that's shown with, what was that newer movie? Just literally Red Riding Hood. The newest one that came out in 2011.
Oh. I have so many feelings on that. None of them good.
But it does show her being the one who's going out to the older woman in more like a training way, like it seems.
Right.
Rather than just her taking supplies. They hint each different type of film that they've done on Little Red Riding Hood, and each different story that is done takes one small fact from the original genuine story and runs on it. Mm-hmm. Now, most of them cherry-pick the sexualization of Little Red Riding Hood and inject that into the wolf so they have less character development that they have to do. Because, lazy.
Yeah. No, I actually had this conversation with a friend.
It makes the whole story suffer.
It does. I actually had this conversation with a friend, and they asked me point blank, did the wolf ever love Little Red Riding Hood in that way? And I answered, no. The wolf being Grandma's familiar in this means it's an extension of Grandma. So
if anything, this wolf looked at her as a child in its pack. literally one to protect and guide.
Right.
And that's it.
Like, the wolf loved her.
If there's any love there, it's of a parental love.
Right. Which is why when the wolf ends up dying to protect her at the end of the story, if you've been reading and paying attention, you feel really bad is because this wolf is just as old as Grandma, and Grandma ain't young in this story.
Think of it along the lines of, if you think the normal expectancy of someone's age back then was actually closer to around 50 or 60 years old at max, and that was old. This grandma would have been about 80 years old, which is around the median of what we're seeing for human life today with modern medicine.
Mm-hmm. Which was unusual back then.
She would have been seen as unhuman because she was living for so long. And thus aiding her being called a witch.
Right. But most people can live to be over 100. Yes, in today's society, if you go back 100, 200 years and said somebody lived to be like 102, they would immediately assume they're not human, they're just wearing human skin. Nah, my guy. my great-grandpa's been around forever. He's seen some shit.
And most of the only places in the world where it was really tolerated, if you were to look at what would be today's the South, below the Mason-Dixon of the United States, witchery and, voodoo and everything is a lot more, not so much accepted, so much as not hunted.
Tolerated.
They're they're tolerated. They're left to live in peace. It would be very few places like that, and those places were actually more modernly and anciently German.
That's true.
German people were less likely back then, and Nordic also.
Yeah, that's very
German,
true.
Nordic, and I believe anything of a Celtic descent.
Irish, Scottish, Welsh.
Anything English, anything French, anything Italian. They were so much more terrified of it that they actually took action.
You could just say anything that was influenced by Abrahamic Catholicism.
Which goes to show you some of the differences of the stories. In the original story, the original Germanic story, Grandma is a witch who is allowed to live on the outskirts of the town, and she's tolerated. She's not hunted. She's just left to live. As long as she doesn't fuck with them, they don't fuck with her.
Right.
But in any other story, they completely obliterate the image that she was a witch at all.
She's just some old lady living out in the middle of the woods. But why? Yeah. Why is she out in the middle of nowhere? Explain this to me.
And she can't help herself? She can't help herself somehow.
Yeah, they make it really apparent in the modern stories, like, Grandma is old and feeble and weak. Then why is Grandma out in the middle of bumfuck nowhere all alone?
Especially when she can barely get out of bed herself. I mean, come on.
Right. So, the reason why in the Germanic fairy tale is that Grandma lives out on the outskirts because she's tolerated for being a witch is because in the story they do make it a point that Red Riding Hood brings new ingredients to Grandma from the town that Grandma just can't get access to because she doesn't... It's not that she can't go into town, it's Grandma herself doesn't like the town. She tells Red Riding Hood that all the time throughout the story. Quote, "The town smells wrong now. Something evil lives there." Which I'm like, ooh, there's a church in the middle of town. It's not that it smells wrong, it's going... She knows her time is coming to an end anyway. Like, it's not good for her to be
because of the Catholic Church.
Right. So it doesn't smell wrong because evil has taken root there. It smells wrong is because paranoia is very slowly starting to infect the town.
Those who have certain powers, especially back then when it was stronger running, if you actually were a witch, you could sense it. Literally.
Right.
Sense the darkness, the evilness of something. And as a lot of people are well aware, the Catholic Church was not exactly
tolerant,
very holy, okay? This was only maybe 200 years after the Crusades, for Christ's sake.
Mm-hmm. So, in the story, Red Riding Hood brings new ingredients to Grandma. Grandma has her for a whole afternoon of learning how to make, potions and stuff. Or, in this case, not even potions, just stuff for people in the town that are sick. And then she takes the new bottles that Grandma made back to Mom, and Mom gives them away to the people who need it. It's not outright stated if her mother and father are apothecaries, but considering Mom does all of this and it is implied that she is married, I have a feeling she married an apothecary to hide in plain sight.
Who's doing the same exact thing that her grandmother can, but he's got an extra appendage between his legs, so therefore it's okay.
Right.
At least until, French Revolution-ish time.
Right. Now, I can feel some people, right? I can feel it. Some people are going to be like, I feel like that's false. You are mistaken. Prior to the modernization of most religions, the actual burning and, outright hate towards certain other religions and groups that do not fall into the standard norm of religion was not only accepted, it was encouraged.
Absolutely it was.
You're a pagan, but have you considered becoming Catholic? No, I've grown up pagan my whole life. Then I'm afraid we must burn you. Huh?
It's almost like a lot of those conversations that if anyone who's here is from New York would completely understand. You've got the Jehovah's Witnesses come knocking on your door. Have you heard of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ? And even worse, the ones who get on the subways and on the buses and reading you the Word of God through their stupid megaphone. But if you said no, you got burned.
Right.
Extremes, people. It's the only thing the Catholic Church knows, and it was inflicted upon this story in order to make it continually sellable.
Right. It's the reason why in modern day retellings of Little Red Riding Hood, I personally always get a bad taste in my mouth. Like when you get a really stale chicken nugget that's been one day past the day you got it. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like that.
I'm sorry. But when you said chicken nugget earlier today, I had watched one of the videos of the horse named Chicken Elizabeth Nugget.
Those are good videos.
The chicken nugget just sounded exactly like when she goes, chicken nugget!
Yeah. But no, the modern retelling of Red Riding Hood in any format that is not outright stating that this is a young, prepubescent girl that is the main character.
Her name is now going to be Chicken Elizabeth Nugget instead of Little Red Riding Hood, but that's okay.
Yeah, actually, in the story, they do not indicate if she has a name. It is usually just Little Red that she is constantly referred to as, is because she loves the cloak her grandmother gave her so much, she's constantly wearing it.
But she constantly knows how to get to her grandmother's house.
Yep. So yes, in the original...
You'd think a bitch would have it memorized by now.
Well, she's 9. She's 9 years old, she really doesn't know anything. But yeah, the modern retelling of any Red Riding...
I mean, it would be the same as memorizing how to get to the bathroom from your bedroom. By the age of 9, you have that shit memorized where you could sleepwalk to it. Don't tell me you don't.
I know, that's true. But also, for the sake of the story, she's 9.
I mean, yeah, for the sake of the story, she's 9, but 9-year-olds can know more than you think.
That is very true. Some 9-year-olds are very perceptive. It's this...
There's a reason why, the show, Are You Smarter Than a 5th Grader exists.
Oh, man. You just got proven to be dumber than somebody who has to raise their hand to go to the bathroom. They should take that out of schools. I shouldn't have to ask you permission to go when I have to go. I know when I have to go. I should be able to get up and bathroom, yep, or I can pee on your floor. Pick an option, friend. I don't care which one.
Yep, one or the other. Which, not uncommon during the medieval times and the pre-medieval times.
Oh, everything.
Now, people would probably just go to a corner of a room and squat.
If that was where the chamber pot was, yeah. Ugh. Dear people, be grateful for indoor plumbing. Be really grateful for indoor plumbing.
Sincerely, everyone who ever had to live with a chamber pot.
It's the reason why, tangent on this, it's the reason why in the Disney movie Hercules, when the fate tells Hades, indoor plumbing, it's gonna be big. You have no idea how true that statement was.
Indoor plumbing, it's gonna be big. I fucking love that movie. Hades is so sassy.
I know, I get the concept, I know. He's kind, he's smart, he's a guy. But yeah, it's the reason why any modern retelling of the Little Red Riding Hood story, where Little Red Riding Hood is a... Huh?
It gets... the word that it's used to describe it being churchized is anglicized.
Yeah.
So that's exactly what they did. They completely anglicized the entirety of the Little Red Riding Hood story.
They did. It's the reason why when I see her being this very, very conventionally attractive 20-something, I am immediately turned off the story because I already know where it's going to go, and I am already, like, tired and over it.
I mean, which is exactly why a lot of people really, like, hated, and when I say hated, I mean hated this one movie of Little Red Riding Hood that they did. Oh god, let me look it back up again. It was almost like oh, there it is. The Red Werewolf Hunter. They completely just, a 19-year-old girl turns into a werewolf hunter, and she's the version of Little Red Riding Hood. Like, what the fuck?
Right.
How do you expect anyone to believe that that's related? Though it obviously is.
You know what? I feel like if they ever actually did a Little Red Riding Hood, like, adaptation, the only person I would accept for it would be that little girl from The Last of Us that also played in Game of Thrones. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yes.
If they made her into Little Red Riding Hood, but kept it to where it's not sexualized, and actually made it a point of, no, Grandma is for realsies a witch, not a cackling old hag with, like, warts and stuff, but just, don't eat that, why? That's poisonous, don't eat that.
more along the lines of, like, the weird ants from Practical Magic.
Right. If they did that kind of a combination of it and actually made it to where sometimes the monsters you really need to be afraid of are not the monsters that come in all these weird, wacky colors and have all these myths about them. It's monsters that look exactly like you that you say hi to every single day.
Exactly.
Hell, I feel like you're being hyperbolic. Not everybody is horrible. You are right, imaginary audience member. Not everybody is horrible. However, we live in the year of Our Lady Dolly Parton 2023. The world is wild anymore.
Lady Dolly Parton. If that's the case, then I'm only working 9 to 5.
You know, I actually said that to somebody. I was like, in the year of Our Lady Dolly Parton, and they were like, is she like making her own religion? I was like, no, but if aliens ever came down and said we had to pick one person to be our leader, most people would say Dolly Parton.
Dolly Parton. Yep. If Elvis had still been alive, I would choose him.
Right?
Oh, he's off planet right now, according to some crazy people. His name's Elvis.
Elvis Presley. Oh yeah. But it is, right? It's one of those things where I understand how we got to this point for this story. It just bothers me that so many people have been okay perpetuating this weird version of it. Like, the original version was kind of low-key fun.
Yeah.
Because in one of the passages in it, right, for Little Red Riding Hood asks her grandma point blank, why don't we put Belladonna in anything? And her grandmother answers her, because Belladonna is too pretty to be used for somebody's feet warts. Belladonna is poisonous.
I mean, I just had a fucking thought, because when I looked up the name of the movie that I was trying to reference, Red Werewolf Hunter, my Google pulled up movies like Red Riding Hood. Tell me why Beauty and the Beast is there. I will tell you exactly why. Because it can be misconstrued as another version of Little Red Riding Hood.
Oh my god, that's also another story that they ruined.
Belle's father could be considered the weird grandma.
Yeah.
The Beast is the wolf.
Gaston
is the huntsman.
Mm-hmm. For the record,
and they just made it's fucking bestiality, Little Red Riding Hood style.
Ugh. Okay, actually, that is also another story. Since this is my channel, we can do whatever we want. So that's another story that they actually ruined. Because somebody tried to tell me, oh, it was a French story to explain to young girls to be okay with whoever they married. And I was like, oh boy, no it's not.
No the fuck it's not.
That is the modern reversion.
It is time to ruin another childhood.
I feel like we should make this a thing, just ruining your childhood a couple stories at a time.
just a couple.
For the record, yes, there was a French retelling of The Beauty and the Beast, literally La Belle et la Bête, about young women being okay with their arranged marriages. That is true. However, that is not the original story. We're back to Brothers Grimm shit. God, I love the Brothers Grimm. The original story goes that Beauty, because that was literally her name was Belle, lived with her father and stepsisters because her mother had died. No, it doesn't matter why, we're not going to get into it. It's the 1400s. Put whatever sickness you want that she died from. It works. Moving on.
Plague! It's the plague!
It's the plague. Right.
Plague.
The father point blank tells them...
I can't bring anyone back from the dead.
Right. The father point blank tells his daughters, hey, I have to go out of town. You guys have to take care of each other. Blah, blah, blah. They don't ask for anything, right? Because their father wasn't well-to-do. He just had to go out of town for whatever the fuck he was going out of town for. Doesn't matter. He eventually gets caught in a storm, and he goes to this, what he assumes to be an abandoned castle. Because they were just everywhere back in the day, I guess. Like, no further follow-up questions were needed. The beast catches him, right? Doing nothing except literally huddling in the archway. Like, the door's gone. My home guy was just, like, out of the rain, I think. The beast tackles him and almost kills him, and the man says, please, I'll give you anything to spare my life. And the beast tells him, do you have daughters? And he goes, yes, I have 4, I think 3 or 4, I forget if it's 3 or 4. 3 or 4 daughters. One of them is the most beautiful one in the region. And he goes, bring me the one that's the most beautiful. This man tries to con him. Tries to con the beast. It is the funniest shit ever, is because every time he tries to pull this con stuff, he sends whatever daughter he picks that's not Belle back to him in pieces with a note indicating, I said send me the prettiest one, not whatever one you didn't love the most. And I was like, damn, no punches were pulled for this.
It was fucking Battle Royale. Anytime Belle didn't walk through that door, he said, come on, boys, we've got another one.
Yeah, so when Belle eventually gets there, because she's seen the brutality of the beast prior to meeting him, she is scared. But the beast, when he sees her, straight up just tells her, this is what's going to happen. He goes, you are going to help my men fix up my castle, and when you're done, I'll send you home. And you're like, alright, that took a really wild turn, but I'm here for it. When I say a dilapidated castle, I mean the roof is about to fall off this bitch constantly. Like, it is...
Think about the old abandoned castles in the lands of Ireland and Scotland. Literally just a couple of walls are still standing.
Right. So, Belle, I think, is 16 when she gets there. She doesn't leave until she's a lot older. But she keeps her word. She helps fix up this castle and everything. The beast does not once make it a mention that he is cursed, that he has a time limit or anything else, but he throughout the story is constantly watching her while she's working, like constantly. She's never really allowed to wander off. And I was like, oh, okay.
Because being creepy and being, leering at a teenager's not, creepy.
It's not.
Yeah, at all.
When the story ends, the beast's curse is finally broken. You find out he's some lord that disappeared like 5 ever ago, blah, blah, blah. He's not good looking. Just so we can put this out there. He is not suddenly a good looking guy.
Rich.
Right. So he tells her, because supposedly he has magic, he goes, if you promise to marry me and never disobey me, I will turn you back into your beautiful self. Because she's been doing hard labor for, I think she's, 30 when she's finally done? Right? She's been doing hard labor for like over 10 years. So homegirl looks rough. And she snaps at him. She goes, you made me waste my life because you were too lazy to fix anything. Why would I now want you to fix something you took from me when I know that I did all this hard work? And it's like, my girl. Like, now is...
Bitch, I fixed it, I keep it.
Right. So the man gets mad because she's not refusing to become her pretty self again and, like, do all the work for him. She just straight up refuses, so he tells her, if you do not marry me, I will turn you into a monster. And she just straight up looks at him, she goes, the dead can't do anything. He has a whole moment of, nani? And she fucking pushes him off of the topmost level of this castle, and he dies.
That is a beast!
Right. But she doesn't leave the castle, because she's tired, she's like, whatever, I'm just gonna sleep. Eventually it gets around to other nobles that this castle is all fixed up and pretty again, and when they go there, they confuse her for the owner of this, and she does not once indicate otherwise. And the story ends that she eventually brings her father to live with her because she doesn't want him living in the middle of wherever anymore. And that's how the story ends. Like, wow, okay, that was a wild ride.
Belle straight just took the place over. Said, alright, bet, it's mine now. Finders keepers.
She literally looked at this man and was like, Omaiwa, shinderu. Nani? If you don't know the meme, literally, Omaiwa shinderu literally means you're already dead.
Nani?
What? This is the reason why, right? Like, a lot of the really old Grimm fairy tales and everything, they were wild, is because it's not really like a cautionary tale of anything. It's indicating to you that these are people at the end of the day. And people are incredibly wild, and there comes a point where you've pushed them far enough, they stop giving a fuck. They don't care anymore. Moral high ground means nothing.
Fucking ain't right, and that's exactly what'll happen if the Russian ever set foot on our land. It'll be Geneva Suggestions all over again.
It's true.
Just saying.
It's true. So this one, I have knowledge to share. Just so that way we're clear on what time period we're going into. Peter Pan is a fictional character created by a Scottish novelist and a playwright by the name of J.M. Barrie. It's about a boy who never grows up on the mythical island of Neverland, where he interacts with fairies, pirates, mermaids, and Native Americans, but put an asterisk on that because that's not really a thing. Its first appearance came out circa 1902. Now you're probably thinking, oh, that's great and all, but what do I care? Oh, well, thank you so much for asking. Here's the deal. The original Peter Pan was wild. Peter Pan is the only boy on Neverland who can never grow up. That means all of the Lost Boys still age. Why do you think Captain Hook always has so many pirates? Who do you think is replacing them? The Lost Boys.
Because the Lost Boys eventually grow up, unlike Peter Pan, who is stuck in boyhood.
Right. It is the reason why in the original story, circa 1902, when Peter Pan started to notice that the boys were aging, he became upset and he would take them out to whatever it was that he wanted to take them out to see, and he would tell them, you have to stop aging right now or I'm going to hurt you. And they said, I don't know how to stop aging. He would kill them. Just straight up. There was no, you don't know how to do that. The answer was yes or no. I don't know.
Which makes me wonder just how stupid these boys were to not figure out, to say, okay.
Right.
If you're really young, you'll believe that you're just like him and that you can't, age, and you'll just look at him and go, okay, no problem.
Right.
Or if you were old enough to the point where he was saying, dude, stop aging, you should be, at that age, smart enough to go, okay, and then hightail it when you had the chance.
Mm-hmm.
Which, theoretically, as I guess, were some of the ones who wandered off to be saved.
Right. So in the story, there's a map, and the map indicates where everything is. In the Bay Area is where Captain Hook lives, is because that little area is something that he took over where all the pirates are. Literally a pirate town. Now, if you read it, it's indicated that Captain Hook came to Neverland through questionable means. Like, they don't even know how they got there, but Captain Hook wasn't even a pirate when it happened. He was like a cadet. Lowest ranking member on there. But he met Peter Pan, they got to having a grand old time and all this other jazz. And when Hook makes mention of it that you don't age, we've been here, we, indicating the pirate crew, have been here for a while, do you not age? Peter gets mad and says, well, you're aging and I don't bring it up to you. And Hook, right, whose actual first name is James, so, haha, tells him, aging is part of growing up. Everybody ages. Even if you never get wiser, you still age. Peter gets so mad at it that he ends up assisting the crocodile in getting Hook's hand bitten off. So there you go.
Now tell me, where does Hook's fear of the clock come from? Because we all know it's not from the crocodile.
Great question. The fear of the clock actually comes from the fact that how it goes, tick-tock, tick-tock. There's a whole chapter dedicated to the fact that after Peter Pan helps him get his hand eaten and everything, he's sitting in, like, the then captain's quarters trying to figure out how to explain what Peter Pan is, and because the clock keeps going tick-tock while he's having a panic attack, it's, like, aggravating it more. So the fear of clocks it aggravates his paranoia. It has nothing to do with the crocodile.
If you also think about it, if you look at the theory that, well, not the theory, but the fact that Hook and Pan were actually friends at one point, and then Hook kept getting older and older, and he knew that meant time was going by, that he resents the clock for ticking and making the time go by faster, thus pulling him further from someone who would have been his friend had he not gotten old.
Actually, that's the reason why it's so messed up, is because Peter, straight up after he gets his hand eaten and everything, comes to him a little bit later and he tells him, Hook, by this point, is the Hook we see in the book of, like, a 45-year-old and everything, and he's like, I just wanted to come and apologize to you. I didn't mean to get so angry. Hook at this point, right, is older, and he's like, I really don't believe that. And Peter's like, no, I have a really important gift for you. And he gives him a cake, right, like a little itty-bitty, like, mini cake, and he's like, really? He goes, this isn't poison. Peter eats a bite of it, it's everything, and they're talking, laughing, having a good time. Hook has finished eating this entire confection, and then Peter tells him, do you know what that pie had in it? And he goes, no. He goes, fairies. And immediately it's like a record scratch, and Hook goes, what? He goes, yeah, I killed a bunch of fairies and baked them into a cake for you, so now you are like me. You'll never age. And it's like, oh my god, that is so insidious. This man literally performed cannibalism unknowingly.
Oof.
Well, because in the
is it considered cannibalism when it's not your species?
Yeah, I guess so. Well, in the original Peter Pan thing, the fairies weren't little like Tinkerbell. They were people-sized.
Either way, cows are bigger than humans. We eat them.
Burgers.
Burgers.
But yeah, so
it's cheddar.
The book makes it a point of telling to you, before we even get to meet Wendy and her brothers, that Peter Pan is very unstable. Incredibly so.
Peter Pan is fucked up. How fucked up? Really fucked up.
Now, here's the thing. When he eventually gets Wendy, right, and her brothers there, Wendy is pretty smart for being, I think, like 13 in this book. She realizes that Peter is so unstable that when he yells at her that you're not being a good mom, and she tells him, I don't even have my own children. Why would I be a mom to a bunch of boys I don't know? Peter doesn't look at her as being a lost boy. He looks at her as somebody to do all the chores he doesn't want to do.
A mother.
Right. So she point blank finds out that there's a pirate town. Now, while Peter and the boys are off doing whatever, she eventually gets to the pirate town, and the pirates are not like pirates that you see in most modern movies where they're just anything goes and like they're leering and everything. They see her and immediately notice, wait a second, that's not supposed to be here. She's not supposed to be here. So they take her to Hook, and Hook tells her, I think you guys really need to go home. And when she tells him, well, how did you get here? You could take us home. He has to tell her, I don't even know how we got here. We've never been able to go home. I would take you home if I could, but I can't. He is not the villain in the original Peter Pan story. He is an antagonist, but he is not the villain.
No, the hell he is not. He just so happens to be an angry dude due to the shit that this little fucker got him into.
Right. Now, eventually, Wendy does get Peter to take her and her brothers back. But you find out that Neverland time and real people time are two totally different things. Kind of like Narnia time.
3 months. 3 months is more like 3 years.
Right. So the day that Peter took them, and by the time they get back, their father, when they left, and their mother were still married and they were still relatively young, when they get back, their father and mother are divorced from each other, and he is a very old man, but they are still children. So he honestly thinks that these are their ghosts showing up, and he has a heart attack and croaks. So
say hi, Daddy.
Right.
Bye, Daddy.
So Peter literally, when he sees this, he doesn't feel bad for them and be like, oh man, I'm so sorry. He goes, well, I guess you guys are going to have to come back to Neverland since there's no grown-ups to take care of you. And it's like, hey, dude, can you wait?
Nope. That man did absolutely, well, not even man, that boy did absolutely not give a fuck. 0 fucks given here.
Yeah, but Wendy eventually, right, because she's the smart one of the group, she goes, we have an aunt that we can go to. She'll take care of us. Thanks for the fun time. And the book just ends where Peter goes back to Neverland and literally is like, man, I haven't talked to that crotchety old Hook in a long time. Maybe I should go visit him. And I'm like, this man can't even get a break from his tormentor because he keeps coming to bother him. It's really sad when you think about it.
Yeah, it is, and it also isn't. Because, I mean, he was able to get his friends back.
His friends.
His friends, or rather his slaves.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people gloss over that.
And eventually, you know, kill maybe 1 or all 3 of them because they keep aging.
Mm-hmm.
How dare. How absolute dare.
Right. So when people say that there's Native Americans in the Peter Pan, I'm like, the Disney adaptation had Native Americans. There were actually Native people that lived in Neverland, but they weren't technically even people. So the Disney version put in Native Americans, which we're not going to touch on because that'll make me mad. But it was poorly done.
Make everybody mad.
It was poorly done. Just like,
Right, I think...
Go
ahead. Go ahead.
That's just like the Rapunzel story is also poorly done. However, I'm willing to give Rapunzel more of a pass is because I absolutely love Tangled. Like, that was the funnest shit I'd seen in forever.
Tangled was just, I mean, frying pans. Who knew?
I know.
They just did that so fucking well.
Right. But Hella, the imaginary audience member, complains, you said that they do it wrong. They do. 99% of the time they do it wrong, but once in a while, they do it right. Tangled is the 1% where they did it right. They were taking, like, the basis of this story, but we were not really hardcore holding on to most of it. Thank you so much. This was fun.
It was what it was, and that's, you know, it was something that they knew it wasn't going to be what the original was. But they owned what it was.
Right. They kept the premise
They
of...
owned Rapunzel for what it was.
Right. They kept the story of girl in a high tower, long hair, witch that technically took her. That's really all they kept of it, but everything else that followed after that very basic color by numbers shit was all theirs. They didn't have to include Eugene the thief. They didn't have to include Pascal the little chameleon, or the horse, or the fact that there was a magic flower. They didn't have to include anything that came with Tangled.
The horse, and I immediately did that stupid little grin with the bottom teeth.
Right. They didn't have to do anything that followed the paint by number stuff. They made it their own, which, for the record, that technically makes it a retelling. Not a reboot, a retelling of the story. There's a difference? Yes. If you're going to retell the story of Sleeping Beauty, you get something like Maleficent. If you're going to reboot the story, you get something like Aladdin. You've taken out all the fun and just left, like, the songs. That's it. That's all you've done. I'm sorry, I'm so salty at Disney. And I know I shouldn't be, but I am.
Alright, I think I'm gonna call it at that.
Yep. Thank you guys so much for
meowing at me.
Okay. Thank you guys so much for showing up. Thank you, Requiem, for coming to talk to me about poorly redone stuff. We should do this again sometime.
Yes, we should.
I'll leave the link for Requiem down into the description below. I hope you guys have an amazing rest of your day. Bye-bye!
Bye!